online business is not an easy business.
Actually, your self-worth to how well the business is doing.
5 people, literally 5 people in the whole country, or is that 5 billion people in the country? There's a big
Talking about 10,000 budget, 20,000 budget, 30,000 budget, different conversation. But at lower budgets, you have to meet expectation.
Welcome to the LumaSense podcast. My name is Adrees, I'm the creative director. I'm joined by Mohsin and Annissa, who are growth consultants. This is the podcast where we teach you about the mistakes not to make with your business, how best to grow your business, how to grow it successfully, how to grow it scalably. And we are going to be focusing today mainly on the common mistakes that business people make, because there's a lot of them. There's a lot to get through today. So from every single stage of the business, from the early stages before you even sort of launch your business, to the early stages, as well as when you're a bit more established, the common pitfalls a lot of business people fall into. So let's start with before business, before you even register it, before you even sort of create a logo, create a name, all that kind of thing. What are some of the common sort of mistakes that people make when it comes to actually validating an idea, right, in the first place?
That is a very, very lengthy conversation. And I think there's no right and wrong answer when it comes to making mistakes. I think in many occasions, the mistakes are made before you even come up with a business or before you even start executing any part of the business. And I think I want to spend a bit of time just talking about, especially when it comes to D2C brands, right? Because this is what we're focusing on here. And every business and every style of business has its own pros and cons. But when it comes to D2C brands, I think a big part of setting up a brand is an understanding the future, your future self, not to make mistakes, is in the planning stages. Actually researching the topic, researching your product. I think a lot of people, they go into D2C brands emotionally, and I think there's this massive misconception. And I don't know where it's come from. Maybe someone here can help me understand. I think people think that when you set up something on Shopify, it's just going to be easy residual business, right? It's just going to be, I just don't know where it's come from. So I speak to so many business owners, and it's like, and they'll be involved in a different business, for example, whether it's brick and mortar or whatever it is, and they're like, I can't wait, I'm going to be investing into an online business. And I'll often ask them, why are you investing in an online business? They'll say, because it's easy. Because
I don't want to deal with the headache of having someone physical. I don't want to deal with employees. I'm just looking at their face like.
So there's the really true, it's like a side business,
yeah,
like a side hustle.
And I think these like I don't want to call anybody out, but like this whole sort of decade or the decades that's passed with all these dropshippers, all these Amazon FBA coaches and mentors, and the way they've sold it is very much like a passive income stream that you can, without lifting a finger, you'll be making thousands or whatever. And that's not the reality for
absolutely.
most.
I'm not shooting down Amazon, Amazon FBA or these coaches. I'm sure a lot of these coaches have value to offer. But I think, yes, the way it's been marketed, by these people, it's like all you got to do is you get a product, you put it up, and then somehow magically the money's going to end up the other side. And I think as a result of that, and because of the mass amount of marketing and social media presence, these people have had, or whoever it is, or whatever information is available, is giving people this false sense of comfort and illusion that you can just go set up an online business, and all you got to do is just get a good product and buy it for cheap from somewhere from a different country, and then you just sell it, and it's just going to sell. And I think that is probably where I want to start from in terms of the biggest mistakes, and reframing that mindset is online business is not an easy business. The only difference is the medium that you're selling on is different. It's online, right? It's not a brick and mortar. Apart from the brick and mortar part, everything else is the same. In fact, I would say it's even more harder. And just hold on, let me say what I mean by that. A brick and mortar shop, let's say you're saying a food shop or a restaurant or whatever it is, there is an understanding that when you get a physical shop, that if you get it in a good location, you're going to benefit from footfall, you're going to benefit from people going past you, there's going to be, people just going past your shop and seeing it, or word of mouth, whatever the case may be. And in some ways you can argue, I'm not saying it's easy, every business has its pros and cons, but you can think, okay, that's a bit more easier. Whereas an online shop, you can have the best website in the world, you can have the best product, you can have the best margins, you can have everything. But no one knows that your online shop exists. Mm-hmm. You're not getting any sales. It's not happening, right? So I think that is probably the first thing. I think the biggest mistake that people make in D2C is assuming that it's going to be easy. And anybody who's been and survived in the D2C space or the online brand for more than 2 to 3 years, right? And I say 2 to 3 years because most businesses fail in the first 2 to 3 years. And this is the reason why I think they fail.
What are the current stats? Do you know?
I don't know, honestly. I should have maybe become more prepared. But I think it's 80% or 80 to 90%.
So I think it's 80% within the first 2 years fail, and then 90% within the first 5 years.
Exactly, and that is a very, very alarming. That's a very alarming statistic. But if you come to think about it, I think the people who fail in the first 2 years have underestimated the work that comes with it.
I don't think they've underestimated the work. I think perhaps they've overestimated how quickly they'll see the results from that work. Especially if you're sort of bootstrapping or you're on a more limited budget. A lot of people think that, you know, even if, okay, fine, I'm on a limited budget, I should still see some results from my efforts after 3, 6, 12 months. And that may not be the case, because those first few months are very much about establishing trust in that space that you're in and trying to work out what works, what people actually want. And I think that's kind of my biggest learning from speaking to so many business owners over the last maybe year or so is a lot of people go into a business or they want to have a brand selling what they themselves are passionate about. Either that's their hobby or something that they themselves feel, you know, very passionate about. And unfortunately, I think that's a completely wrong mentality to have, because they themselves feel like there's a need for this product because, you know, that's something that they interest them specifically. But that's not to say that that's a general demand within the general internet, within the general world, right?
Absolutely.
Like, and not to mention, okay, so you're passionate about one thing now. When that passion runs out, does that mean that you're not interested in the business anymore? If your entire business is set up on your passion for this one particular thing, like for example, when I had my children, my babies were small. Obviously, I was very much interested in like breastfeeding equipment and things like that. Now I'm out of that phase of my life. If I set up a business then, just based off my passion for that particular niche at that time, and then things got tough, I would have been like, well, I'm not really interested in that stuff anymore because I'm not at a different point in my life now. Let's throw in the towel. And I think that's where with business, you kind of have to have something that kind of keeps you going through the tough times. That's irrespective of your personal interest in what you're selling and what your brand is.
At the same time, do you need to have some level of an interest in what it is that you're actually selling, what you actually do?
People are different. Like some people are motivated by what they're selling and what the product specifically is. A lot of people are motivated just purely by the opportunity, and I think that's where, you know, there's two different business owners. One is not more right than the other, but it's very possible to just be motivated by the opportunity, by the numbers.
So say there's a person that's, you know, got a hobby, got an interest, and they're thinking, oh, maybe I should turn this into a business, right? What can they then do to actually check, is this a viable business? Is this actually something that we can actually?
And then before we answer that, I was having this conversation with a few friends literally the other day. And I was having a conversation with them, and it was like we were talking about resilience, right? Like the resilience to do something. And what we were talking about was that no matter what you do, no matter how much you love something, right? No matter how much you love something, whether forget business for a second, whether you love gym, whether you like, you know, playing pool, whether you like playing football, whether you like doing anything in life, right? Once you start taking it seriously for a prolonged period of time and you're wanting to become good at it, it becomes a chore. And that's fact, right? Like, I remember in my early days, right, when I started going back when I was like, you know, 15, 16, 17 years old, I can't remember the age now, and I'm that old, right?
No,
right.
no, so it was something that happened a couple of years ago.
Yes, yeah, a couple of years ago, let's go with that. And honestly, when I used to go to the gym, I used to be so excited. I used to be like, do you know, I used to be bouncing off the walls I'm going to the gym, because I used to be satisfied about it. Now when I go to the gym, I treat it like a job. I know I need to go to the gym, I need to stay fit, I need to stay, you know, I treat it, I go to the gym, right, you know, kind of convert to go to the gym. Okay, when you go in, you know, your hormones, you know, kick in, and you get a buzz out of it, and you come out of it. But no, I don't want to go. But the thing is, I know it needs to happen, and I think that's key to anything in life. That anything that you're going to do for a prolonged period of time is going to become a chore, is going to become boring. So in order for you to do something for a long period of time, there needs to be more than just passion for that thing, because that passion is very quickly going to turn into boredom. And I think that's the thing with business is that, for example, if you're doing something as a business and it's a passion, you genuinely like it, you need to emotionally detach yourself from that thing and find an external validation process that once my passion for it runs out. I'll give you an example. Often they say, right, people who love cooking, and most people who get into cooking food businesses, right, especially, and hopefully I'm not overgeneralizing, but like, you know, when, for example, females who, you know, have good, you know, they have good cooking skills and they cook, you know, for example, from a home kitchen, and they say, I can cook, or an Instagram page or a WhatsApp group or a local community, and they cook food, and they say, I'm very good at cooking, right? And they enjoy it. And after 6 months, they enjoy it. After when it becomes a chore, they've got the cleaning chore, they've got the house to do with. Now they've got cooking chore, their customer business is growing, and more people are putting the orders in. They don't want to even eat their own food anymore. It's like, I don't want to eat it.
Whoops, sorry to interrupt the podcast. If you are enjoying the podcast or taking benefit from it, please consider subscribing to us with a button below. Also, if you have a business that you want to grow and want to scale, and you want to scale it profitably and successfully, there's a link in the description below that you can click, and you can jump on a call with us, and we can analyze your business and see how we can work together to make more money for you.
I think alongside that also, if you're, say you do have a hobby or you have a certain interest or a skill set that you're proud of, like you're, for example, a personal trainer, for example, you work really hard to build up your own physique, you're training clients, and you think, okay, let me start up a brand, setting my own gym equipment as an example. You kind of run the risk that when the business is not doing very well, you attach your self-worth to how well the business is doing, because you feel like it's a reflection of your own skill set as that professional in your niche, a personal trainer in this case, that, well, my business selling my gym equipment is not doing well, I can't be that good of a personal trainer. And I feel like that's quite dangerous as well. Like if you're attaching your self-worth is attached to your business's success or how well it's doing, it can be quite toxic from that perspective. I think even from that perspective, having that healthy boundary between where your interests lie or where your passion and hobbies are and what you're doing a business in, yes, there can be some overlap there, but you can't let that kind of dictate how you feel about yourself and your passion for something. Like,
and I think that's where the line is, right? You can almost definitely set up a business as a passion, but I think you need to have external factors to validate that. I think let's talk about how would you validate it. I think that's what Liz was asking. Like, okay, let's say you've got a passion project. What is a passion? Whatever it is, the validation process is going to look very similar for both of them, right? So I think one of the obvious things when setting up a business is understanding I think on the top level is obviously market opportunity, right? And I think even before market opportunity, probably I'll try to count it, is understanding the budget that you have available. And I think that's very, very important for people to understand something. And I think this is something I learned, thankfully, quite early on in business, which is before you understand what you're going to invest in, and before you become bogged down with a particular market, I think the first thing to understand is what budget are you paying with.
That'll dictate what you can
exactly, and I think that's very important. Like if you're dealing with, I don't know, £5,000 to deal with, right? And just for reference for the audience, listeners, I started with £1,000 budget, right? That was going back a long time ago when I was a lot younger. I didn't have the same responsibilities. Could I start with a business with £1,000 budget now? Probably not, right? But then back then, there was a different conversation. So now if somebody's setting a business, the first thing you need to understand is what money am I going to access? What's going to be my rough budget I'm going to be able to access? Whether it's from an investor, whether it's from a personal, whether it's saving, whether it's family, whatever it is, what that number is. And I think that is a good check to realize. For example, if you're going to be selling tables, right? I'm going to give a random example. Imagine you're going to be selling tables, right? And an average table costs you, I don't know, £40, £50 to purchase, and you're going to sell it for a couple of £100, whatever it is, example. You've only got a £5,000 budget. You can do the maths very quickly. That you're going to only be able to buy X number of sizes or variations of colors. Obviously, for a business, you want variation of colors, different things. That, okay, for this much, I'm only going to be able to buy this. Is that going to be enough for me to go to market? Versus, if I'm selling glasses on the other hand, just use that as an example because that's going to come to my mind. If I'm selling glasses, it's probably going to be in the pennies, right? It's probably going to be, let's say around a pound, a bit more than a pound, less than a pound, around that mark, depending on the type of glass it is, right? That's a different conversation, right? You can buy a bit more, you've got more flexibility.
I think on that note, I think you've also just made another mistake that a lot of people make when they're doing this rough maths in their head, is they're looking at what the cost of that product is versus how much budget they have, and then they just do the quick calculation, quick division, but they don't actually leave any room, any budget for anything else.
Absolutely. No, I hadn't watched that thing yet.
So
talk about pulling it out in front of everybody.
No, I'm just saying that everybody seems to think that the entire budget should be based on what they're going to sell, and that is it. And then they get the product and they're sitting there in the spare room or whatever they've got, and then they've got no money to market it. And then they're like, oh, okay, so let me, just post organic on social media and see where that takes me. And then they just sat there with that same stock lying in the corner of their room.
So before we get to that, so what do we say? So for validation, I think one thing I mentioned is obviously the marketing, the budget that you have available. Once you understand the budget that you have available, I think the next thing to understand is, okay, how do you now go validate your business idea? Let's say you've got an idea, hypothetically, the idea is X. What would you say is the most important thing for people to go down to validate?
I think if we're just starting off with the most basic thing to check is market demand. If people are even
So how do you check that?
and how you would check.
What does demand mean? I think there's also types of listeners to the podcast. And what would you say is what do you mean by demand?
How frequently, how many people, or how often are people searching?
If it's a glass, of course everybody has a glass in there.
Everybody has glass in
We
their
used
house.
to make that
But
joke
if you-
years ago, didn't we? That was it phone cases?
Yeah.
I think about it, everyone has a phone, so everyone needs a phone case. So therefore, the whole world.
Well, to be fair, most high streets in England right now do follow that same logic that everybody needs.
Honestly,
10 phone shops.
I think we're just talking about our high street here. That's not generalized.
No, but okay. So what was the question?
So how do you actually go about working?
So if we're talking about D2C, then you know that okay. First of all, you have to check something like glasses. Do people buy your general everyday kitchen glassware online? If they do, you know it's going to be dominated by.
How would you check it?
It's common sense. Like if you're going to be buying glasses from online, you're normally going to be doing that when you're renovating your kitchen, for example, renovating a house, or you want to buy new things. So it's normally going to be things like from IKEA, from Asda, from these kind of stores that specialize in homeware. If you have a store that's selling just glasses that are just basic, your everyday normal glasses like this, there's nothing special about it, then you need to understand, do you even have a USP with these glasses?
So you're saying that if you are looking at a product, you need to look at the demand and then understand what the point of differentiation is.
Exactly.
So how does one go about looking at product differentiation? What do you look at? Which angles do you look at?
So starting off with demand, so the easiest way to check things is like just do a quick search on Google Trends, and that gives you, it's arbitrary numbers, they're not like to the T exact, but it just gives you a general graph. I think it goes back to the last like 20 years now, just year by year, month by month, how the demand has fluctuated, how many people have been searching for this particular thing, and it'll give you an idea of trends. It won't give you an idea of volume. So I think that's the most important thing. Like people see the line is all the way at the top. Okay, there's people searching for it.
I think it's very important to explain the difference between a trend and volume, right? The
Yeah.
trend is the general direction that product has.
It just
been
shows
moving
you
in.
if there's certain times of the year
It
when
goes up or down.
It goes up or
It's
down.
just it's like a broad way of
It's
understanding what's going on. But it's not telling you 50,000 people or 60,000 people.
No, it
searching.
doesn't give you that specific.
Okay.
Obviously, if you have access to like Google Ads account, Google Keyword Planner is also good for this. Again, these are all the free ways that you can kind of assess the general trend or demand for a certain product. And the next thing to do, I would say, is just go on social media, go on TikTok and type it in the search bar and just watch the organic videos. So not the creators that are like selling the products, but just see what the general sort of conversations are around the product that you have in mind. From people or creators that are posting organically, talking about the product, talking about its features, the benefits, and more importantly, try and see if there's anybody saying that why does this product not have this particular feature. And more importantly, looking at sort of the organic videos and see if anybody in the comments or even the creators themselves are calling out why that something doesn't exist in for this particular niche. Like, if there's people sort of saying that, well, if only we could take, the products from the benefits from this product and combine it with this product, why does this not exist? Or why has nobody made this?
Okay.
Those are kind of like the themes that you're looking for when you're kind of
So you're
doing
saying
that
basically
research.
explore the current discourse or conversation regarding a particular area or niche topic and
Definitely.
to see what's going on. So okay,
And
so
just to understand what people's frustrations are with the current options available, and that will give you an idea of indication of, okay, so if I go to the market with the exact same thing that everybody else is selling, which is lacking what people actually want.
But what about people who say, okay, do you know what's the same thing has come at a cheaper price?
Well, then
Or there is that argument, right? That says, sorry to cut you off. There is that argument, right? That says that you can spend. Basically, somebody can sell the same product. So whoever has the biggest budget comes in, gets the most amount of customers and wins. Is that true?
I would say that if that's the entire strategy, which is to always be cheaper than everybody else, it's basically a race to the bottom. Because then they'll see the same. They'll undercut you by a few pennies. You'll undercut them by a few pennies, and at the end of the day, like
no one makes any money.
who's left with anything?
So
Your strategy should revolve around
Everybody kind of keeping the prices around the same.
So yeah, if you're in a market where you've kind of seen that people kind of keep the prices around the same, then that's a good sign as well. That if you're just trying to validate some sort of general ideas, so if you're looking at your competitors and there's not that much of a range, and I think the point of differentiation should be what you actually uniquely offer that's slightly different. It doesn't have to be like, most businesses are not innovations in and of itself. Like they are just slight tweaks on what's already out there, and the positioning of those products. It could be the positioning, could be, you know, the like just general sort of features or the benefits of it. They've just been slightly tweaked or improved. And not even that, it may not even need to be tweaked or improved. It's just if the messaging that comes across is more coherent.
And I think that's what I was going to say. I think sometimes it's not even about features and benefits. Sometimes the conversation is who's got the better marketing plan, right? Because obviously sometimes some people have a product, right? They'll sell a product and they have the best features. They think my product has the best ingredients, my product has the best material, my product has got this technology. But if you don't actually know how to communicate that to your target audience in a way that they understand, versus there might be somebody else probably with a slightly inferior product, but they know very well how to tell the story about the product, I think 9 out of 10 times the other one's going to win. And I think another important thing to look at, what we're talking about, validation of a business idea. Also, we've spoken about the demand, the general trend. We've talked about looking at the general discourse, what's happening. I think another important thing, which people don't often is looking at reviews of competitors or related, and then going through the positive reviews, seeing what people are buying for. For example, imagine you go to a business and all the positive reviews are about maybe how good it smells, or how good the quality is, or how fast the delivery is, or I don't know. And then
that's your baseline. That you have to at the very least meet that criteria. But my personal favorite, like I think you were trying to say, is actually look at the negative reviews.
You took that out of my mouth.
See where they're lacking, and make sure you incorporate that into your own business strategy, that you are going to hit on these pain points that people have within this industry with this particular competitor or competitors, and figure out a way of how you can improve that.
But the reason why I started with positives is because I think the number one, the positive reviews will tell you to what level the customers are involved. Like, for example, if you're in an industry where people leave a paragraph review, right, versus you go to an industry where they just leave 2 words as a review, or they just don't even leave a review, they just put 5 stars and that's it, and they leave it, right? It tells you the type of people that you're dealing with. Are you dealing with emotional buyers? Are you dealing with people who don't really care, they're just looking for a product and stuff? And I think that kind of helps you build, okay, if these are, and look, using AI, and I think the fact that we haven't mentioned AI, we're like, I don't know, half an hour into this podcast is probably a bit weird, especially when it comes to analysis. One good way of seeing that is to get your customers' reviews, your competitor reviews, or copy and paste them, or if you can, or I don't know, how you want to do it. Put it into any AI software, whether it's ChatGPT, whether it's Gemini, whatever that you're using, chuck it into there, and get it to analyze and ask it to quickly analyze the data for you to see, what are the main features of this brand. So you can look at that in a quick snapshot and understand, okay, do you know what? This is what the main pillars are of this brand. You know where I'm at. And likewise, the negative reviews. And I think the reason why negative reviews are sometimes hard to work with is if a business is doing generally well, the negative reviews aren't going to be that much. And negative reviews that people are, quite frankly.
But they'll give you an indication of, they may not be representative of the majority of the views, but if you see a recurring theme, like the company is slow to dispatch, for example, then okay, there's probably a bottleneck in the operational processes. There's a reason why they are not dispatching same day or next day as per customers' expectations.
Absolutely.
So then you kind of
I think customer expectations have been massively skewed by Amazon.
Okay,
I just want to put it out there, right? And this is another thing for the listeners, right? Especially when you're going into online businesses. I think, although people are online businesses, but people, when they're dealing with online businesses, they're not dealing with humans, right? And I think this is an important part to understand. Even though you're a human at the back of behind of it, since the Amazon era has started, however long that's been, and the kind of service that they give, it's just become a normal expectation for all online businesses to reach that threshold of a business, which is there needs to be no questions asked when there's a return. The delivery needs to be on point next day, right? And some businesses just don't have as when you're a small business, you don't have that level of, in most cases, you're like a single person, a very small team running around doing multiple jobs. You don't have that level of ability to meet that same level of logistics. But when you're in the online space, it's just an expectation. Unless you're in an industry where there is an expectation that the product takes, a certain amount of time to make, or it's a handmade product, or whatever the case may be. Even then, people don't like to wait around. People want instant gratification. And I think that's another important part to understand is your ability to fulfill what you're saying you're going to fulfill. And because you don't want to build, if you will listen to one of our previous podcasts, you don't want to build negative momentum in a brand, right? So we've discussed obviously our reviews, positive and negative. We talked about trends. Is there anything else when you're validating a product that you should be looking at? I think one key one that comes to mind is obviously marketing, right? That how much is it going to cost you to penetrate the market?
That's really tricky. How would you say we can sort of work that out just based off of what?
Look, I think the first thing is obviously when you look at your competitors, looking at the type of content that they're creating, looking at the type of ads that they're running, through whether it's Meta Ads Library, whether it's through TikTok or tools, or whether it's Instagram, or whatever platform that you're looking to use. The first thing is to identify where the majority of your target audience is. Like, is it mainly on Meta? Is it on TikTok? Is it on Pinterest? Is wherever it is. Once you identify that, is to really study that platform and understand how are my competitors marketing to my customers or to the potential customers. Are they using, emotional tactics? Are they doing storytelling tactics? Are they using organic content, right? Any business that's going to scale at any reasonable level is going to have ads as part of it. And I think, obviously, you can do research to find out, obviously, what the expected cost per acquisition is for a product, right? Is it going to be between £5 and £10, and between £10 and £15, and between £20 and £25, depending on your average order value, and depending on what the product's worth. And there you can do pretty simple maths, right? Like, to understand, okay, if the cost of acquisition for a particular product is going to be £20, and you know that this is, again, you'll never know the numbers like to the dot because you're not in the business. Mm-hmm. But you can do that like broad forecasting that if my average order value is going to be this roughly, and this is what the cost of acquisition is roughly in the industry, and let's say the conversion rate on a website is, if you're a really good business, you're at 4-5%, right? Most likely probably don't want to start with that. Let's say you say 2-3% would be on the low side, 2%, whatever the case is. You look at, okay, this is if the click-through rate on an ad's going to be 1%, right? You can start adding up these numbers through.
It's just basically a big maths equation.
It's a big maths equation, and then you just make different, like, kind of slightly different scenarios, and understand, okay, in order for me to get this many customers in this period of time, I'm going to need this much budget at the minimum to achieve that. And I think that's another thing before validation comes, is expectations. If you're going into a business and you've got a £500 budget and your average order value is £40, right?
Yeah.
You need to understand that, okay, if your cost of acquisition is £20, you times that by, however many people, there's only so much you can make out of that £500 budget. But people want to put a £500 budget in, business owners, and expect £5,000, £10,000 back. And it's just not how numbers work. It's just not realistic to expect that, right? So that's another thing.
But that's not to say you can't make a start with a small budget.
I think that's where a lot of businesses close down. I'm going to be honest. This is my personal opinion. I know it might not be. But I think this is where a lot of businesses close down. Because they're expecting money to spend £250. That might be all the budget that they have. And I totally understand that. But it's not meeting up the expectations. £250, you've got £20 budget, you'd be lucky to get a sale every couple of days.
Yeah.
Right? You'd be lucky, right? And you'd be lucky to get a sale every couple of days. Our £250 budget. Now, when you're talking about £10,000 budget, £20,000 budget, £30,000 budget, different conversation. Mm-hmm. But at lower budgets, you have to get your expectation. And I think another important thing to understand about validating your business is understanding if your product has any retention system to it. If you're buying a product, right, and you need to understand, is your product a consumable or is your product a one-time purchase? Yeah. And that's also going to affect the viability of your business and how you do it. If it's a consumable and somebody uses my product and after every 6 weeks or every 8 weeks or every 10 weeks they're going to come back and use it, you may actually be okay with spending a higher acquisition cost, the amount of money you're spending in ads to get one customer, and you might even decide, I'll make a loss on it. Because I know that the first time I make a loss on them, then they're going to go into my retention, and by retention I mean email marketing, SMS marketing, organic socials, whatever it is that you're going to use to retarget them. You're going to use that product, and they're going to come back 6 weeks later, 8 weeks later, and they're going to come for 5-6 times a year to me. That's where you're going to make your money. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're going to sell a product, you don't buy glasses every day, right? Your strategy has to be very different, because how often is this customer going to come back to you? They bought it. They might not come back to you for another 8 months, a year.
In a situation like that, you need to try and maximize the average order value then, isn't it? So you want to try and get in that one opportunity that you have with a customer on your website ready to buy, you need to try and sell them as much as possible. Whereas, as you say, with a product that's more of a consumable, you can get away with making a loss and letting them just get away with one or a couple of items because more likely than not, they'll be back in a month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, etc.
Absolutely. And I think this is another, whatever the product is, whatever the business is, I think this is another consideration when you're validating the business, when you're coming up with your numbers and understanding. Because I think a lot of businesses, they panic, right? They're looking at, okay, I made the sale now. They're looking for the next sale, not appreciating that this potential one sale that they made is not worth making a random number at £40. This actual sale is worth £500, right? Over a period of time, right? I'm going to like there's a recent brand that we've been working with, right? And they've got their subscription rates have gone up massively, right? And the ads they're getting a customer, but they're staying with that business for 4, 5 months, 6 months, right? Even though they might not be making a huge amount of customer, but because the retention strategy is quite strong, they're coming back again and again for that product. So you look at it over the long term, right? And that makes a difference in your validation of your business, right? What else would you say is important for validating a business idea? Obviously, we've spoken about reviews. We've spoken about obviously retention systems. We talked about looking at industry discourse and information. That's great. I think Reddit is another important platform to look at. Definitely, I think Reddit. I don't know if Reddit is embedded with Google or not, but Reddit seems to be coming up a lot more in searches. And I think another thing will be Instagram and TikTok, because they're acting like search engines. And if you search anything on the internet, you'll see that video results are being shown a lot more now, and you can see generally what's happening around that conversation. I think another one.
And one mistake, if I can interject, is not to rely so heavily on ChatGPT for product validation at this early stage, because it will pick up on your sentiment that you really want to do this business, you really want to start it, and it will start cheering you on for good or for bad.
ChatGPT is your biggest fan. If everybody leaves you, you would have got ChatGPT to, it's because I mean, it's like an echo chamber, right? I think when you feed it enough information, it starts to understand how you think and what you do, how you do certain things, and it starts to give you back what it wants to hear. So unless you understand how to give it prompts properly, and even then, I personally believe, especially if you're risking a large budget on a business, I wouldn't take the risk on I think ChatGPT would be a good place to start, just to get you the initial conversation to think about, but then go on separate platforms and do your individual primary research to understand what's going on. Because all AI is going to do is scrape the internet and give you information that's already available, but you need to analyze it. But I think another important tool I think a lot of people don't talk about often is, I think it's called Ask the Public, right? I think Ask the Public is another way of validating.
Answer the Public.
Answer the Public. Answer the Public, right? Answer the Public is a tool that you can use, right? And it just talks about, based on your topic, all the different questions people are asking and how much they're asking those questions and the different categories they're asking questions in. Again, I think that's another important part to look at and another important tool to look at, that when you're validating a business idea, you should see what are the different questions people are asking, what they're talking about. And that will also give you an idea, okay, what are the answers to these questions? That will be another good way to look at it. And I think another important part is looking at blogs. Now, I know blogs is one of those things that people use ChatGPT for, but if you read people's articles and see how often they've been updated, if there's an industry and the articles have been updated regularly and they're in the present, in the how, then it's very much a common, it's a common thing. And people's blogs will give you, or business competitor blogs will give you a good idea of the main problems they have in the industry. Because let's be honest, that's how businesses, why they write blogs, right? Is to come up in high in search rankings. Also, and most often than not, they are answering questions that are general concerns of the people, right? So that's another way to, I think, validate an idea, is to read people that, the content articles that people have written and understand, what are they talking about, what are the different, and I think if you spend a long time on the things that we've just mentioned, and this is not talking about paid tools like, SEMrush and looking at the search volumes and looking at competitor analysis, looking at similar web and looking at the different crossovers between the websites and marketing budgets and all these things, then if you just spend that much, what we've just spoken about, right? And you take a long time, it will give you a good understanding of roughly where to start from. And I think once you've got past that point, I think it's probably you're at the stage of starting to maybe start doing a bit of primary research, maybe going to some customer focus groups, maybe going on Facebook, maybe Meta, TikTok, whatever it is, and just asking people that, look, you're looking to think of a certain product, what they think about it, would they buy it? Maybe go, do like tests with people. What do you think? How would you go about doing something like that?
Yeah, as in I think the most effective tool that I've seen other sort of business owners do before they launch their business is to make a brand new TikTok account, not relate to the business at all, just make it like just a normal account for themselves, create a number of organic social media posts highlighting the problem that they've seen, just to see if there's people agreeing with them in the comments.
Mm-hmm.
And from there you can kind of gauge, obviously the risk here is people say, oh well, people will still want business idea, but business ideas are never unique. Like, no one can steal a business idea. The thing that kind of determines a good business from a bad business is the execution of it. So if you're worried that someone's going to steal your business idea, well, if you've got nothing there, then there's nothing
I think
to steal.
but if you're at that point, you're making a TikTok page, you've probably done a fair amount of research. You've probably because people. I truly believe people can copy things that they can see.
Yeah.
They can never copy the process behind.
No,
it,
exactly.
Right?
So
they don't know what you've done, what you've got in the behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So you were saying in terms of the TikTok page.
So literally just create some TikTok posts, just speaking to the camera, very authentic. Don't make it look like you're a business owner pitching for people's ideas or whatever the case is. And just highlight, like, guys, I'm so, like, here's why does this not exist, blah, blah, blah. Just talking about the problem that you've seen in that particular industry and kind of hinting towards the solution that you will be providing, but not like you're providing it. Why does nobody provide the solution? And you will be surprised. You'll be surprised how many people in the comments will either point you in the direction of somebody that is selling that and then you've never had a clue about, or agreeing with you or disagreeing with you. And either way, you'll get a ton of primary data there of how real people from that target audience will respond to when this product is actually on the market.
I think that's a very clever idea. So basically saying, once you look at other people's discourse, create your own discourse around the topic. Encourage people to obviously, comment, speak, and talk about it, and that'll give you, that'll see if you're, on the right trend. I think that's a very good idea.
Because it gives you insight into two things. Because one thing is interest, right? There's for any idea, however obscure it is, there is gonna be some group of people that's interested in it. But is that 5 people, literally 5 people in the whole country, or is that 5 billion people in the country? There's a big difference there. Whereas with something, if you were to go down this TikTok method, as you just said, it would give you an idea, like, if you got 2 or 3 comments, people saying, yeah, this is a really good idea. That's not enough validation to go and, invest a few £1,000s into this. But if you're getting, more comments, more likes, people are sharing this video, it's clearly a bigger topic, then you have a better idea as to the volume side of it as well.
And I think this is what they call, the minimum viable product, right? Is that the word? Minimum viable product is obviously understanding to see if your niche is not too niche, right? How big it is, and if you can actually run a business. But that's very important. Yeah. Sometimes people run a business, it might be really, really good, but if there's not enough people on it, so you need to be able to understand sometimes you need to niche down, sometimes you need to niche up, right? Because there's another brand that we've been working with, right? And they've got an amazing product, right? It's a very focused product, and it fixes a particular concern. But we've spoken to them and we've advised them that they actually need to continue with what they're doing, but maybe niche up, so they can open up the market to a wider range of people. And I think is going to do wonders for them, because they're in the niche down version, they've done really well, but when they're niching up, and I think that's very important to understand when you do a business, especially in the validation stages, is understand what your business is going to look like, what it can look like, and where it is. And that's okay, that's open to change, because you might run the business and after a 6 months, year, you think, okay, do you know what, I'm going to change the trajectory based upon what you're getting. And that's something you have to be. And that's another important thing when it comes to validation in the business. You need to know that you can do all of these things that we've spoken about and run the business, start the business, and then 6 months later, you may need to change all of that again.
And that's fine.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
And it's not about a failure. It's about adapting. The best business are those businesses that can adapt and move as quick as possible and be agile. Because you may validate it and you might think, okay, based upon your hypothesis, this is what's going to happen. And it may happen like that, but then you might realize that in your product offering, there's a product that is really blowing up, that you think if you focus things around and you open that up a little bit and went in that direction, it might be better for the business, and then you go down that direction. So I think, and going back to our earlier conversation about passion project, I think that is where the biggest problem happens when there's a passion project. Because you think you know better than the audience about the product, because you think you know everything about the product. You're not able to detach yourself emotionally. But when you detach yourself emotionally from the business and you know the business is there to make money, you'll go where the money takes you. You'll go where the least amount of friction to make that money. If you're just having to, and I've seen this, right? You can tell, right, if you've spoken to some businesses, right, and you pick up the phone and speak to them, and rather than actually listening to you, they will give you a whole lecture as to why that you're wrong about a certain product, or why you're buying the wrong product, or how you don't understand, or whatever the case may be, right? As a customer, I don't want to understand. I want to understand what I want to understand. Buy the product. If you can't offer it, go somewhere else. And that's just as simple as that, right? So I think that's another important part. Even with that emotional detachment, I think that makes a big difference when it comes to business. And I think in the next episode, I actually wanted to talk about mistakes across the business, but I think we just about finished the validation part, right? So I think maybe in another episode we can talk about mistakes when you're actually starting the business.
Absolutely, and apologies because that's 2 episodes in a row now. Well, all we've done is de-influence you from starting a business, make you so worried, so on edge that have I done everything right? But look, at the end.
But listen, but we've also saved them thousands. Because you saved them a
That's exactly what I
lot.
was going to say. At the end of the day, we're saving you money here because, last thing you want to do is invest, all your hard-earned savings into something without even knowing fully what you want to get yourself into, which is a very, very common thing for business people, right? How many business people do we know ourselves that have done that and essentially lost everything?
Guilty. Guilty. I'm guilty over here.
So there we go. So so this is the podcast in which we teach you how best to run your business, how to scale it, common mistakes to avoid, and how best to actually grow your business. So make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes of the podcast. Thank you for watching.